There's a good chance that lossless audio is not what you think it is, and it's partly Apple's fault. Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and I've actually been seeing normies out there, non-audiophiles, talking about lossless audio again. And I think it's because Apple recently announced that lossless audio support is finally coming to the AirPods Max, their over-ear Bluetooth headphone. Now, I'm not the only one who thinks that lossless audio is a little misunderstood. In fact, on a recent episode of the Waveform podcast, Marques Brownlee of MKBHD gave his own hot take.
I have a hot take that's going to burn this whole podcast.
So because a lot of normal people are paying attention to lossless audio right now, and frankly, even a lot of audiophiles kind of misunderstand it, I'm going to break down lossless audio in this episode of Waveguide. And if you like the idea of helpful tutorial style content like this, you're also going to like our sponsor, HiFiGo. HiFiGo is like an online retailer where you can buy IMs, headphones, and accessories. If you want to see what's new on their site, I've got them linked in the description down below. So check them out and then come back here for some hot takes on lossless audio. So here's how Apple actually added to the confusion around lossless audio. A couple of weeks ago, they made this post, which is announcing a couple of updates to the AirPods Max. One of those updates is that the AirPods Max are going to have lossless audio compatibility. The other update is that there's going to be a new USB-C to 3.5 millimeter cable that you can buy for $39. But here's the thing, those two updates are not actually related, and to understand why, well, it helps to understand what lossless audio even means. So when we're using this word lossless, we're talking about digital audio files, right? And the purest, most uncompressed digital audio file is going to come in a format like a WAV file, right? That's something you might have encountered at some point in your life. But the problem with an uncompressed WAV file is it's a pretty large file. For a 60-minute long music album, for example, it might be a gigabyte or larger. But some people found out that you can compress that music and get the same 60 minutes of music down to a tenth of the file size, around 100 megabytes or even less. And that's called an MP3. And now that's something that you've probably encountered, but frankly, like most of the digital audio that you encounter in your life is going to be compressed digital audio, whether you're streaming from Spotify, watching a movie on Netflix, or even like taking a phone call over Bluetooth. It's all compressed audio because compressed audio is faster, cheaper, and it's more convenient in a lot of ways. But of course, there are sacrifices to get a WAV file down to a tenth of the size. There is information that is lost, right? When you go from a WAV to an MP3, and if you unpack that MP3 back to a WAV format and you compare it with the original, there are actually differences because information is sacrificed in order to get that file size down, right? This MP3 is a lossy format, but there are lossless alternatives such as FLAC, right? So if you compress a WAV file, that same WAV file, to a FLAC format, it's not going to be a tenth of the file size like an MP3, but it's still going to be about half the file size, and that's pretty useful. But then you unpack that FLAC to a WAV file and you compare it with the original WAV, there's literally no difference, and that's why it's called lossless. All right, so back to Apple. They announced that lossless audio support is coming to the AirPods Max, but it's not that simple because, well, you might think of the AirPods Max as a Bluetooth headphone, but you're not going to get lossless audio over Bluetooth. Here's kind of a diagram of why. All right, so you have your lossless FLAC file that's on your phone, and it's going to get transmitted over Bluetooth to your AirPods Max. Bluetooth can't transmit this file directly. It has to recompress it to a file size that's small enough that Bluetooth can handle, and that recompression is not lossless. That is a lossy compression. So by the time the AirPods Max receive that digital file, they're going to unpack it and turn it to analog so you can hear it, but this digital version is technically a lossy file. So in order to actually get lossless audio with the AirPods Max, you're going to need a cable kind of like this, a USB-C to C cable, so that you can connect the AirPods Max directly to your phone or your laptop. And what that looks like is like this. This will give you an actually lossless signal where you have your original lossless file on your phone, and you're going to connect your phone to your AirPods with a cable that is a purely digital cable, and you don't have to do any recompression to transmit that file over this cable. So the AirPods Max are going to receive this lossless file, and then there they can do the conversion to analog to give you the squiggly lines that hit your ear and make you happy. And in this case, you are in fact listening to lossless audio. But here's the thing, this cable that I just showed you, that's not the one that Apple just talked about in this same story. In fact, the cable they talked about was something more like this, where you've got 3.5 millimeter on one end and USB-C on the other end. And this is an analog connection over here. So here's what that looks like. Let me pull up this little diagram. So basically with this new cable that Apple announced, you're going to start with your FLAC file, right? It's going to be on your phone, and in this case, it's going to be on a phone that still has a headphone jack. And that headphone jack, or that phone with a headphone jack has a DAC built into it. So it's going to do the conversion of your lossless audio file to an analog signal. Then it's going to connect to this new Apple cable via 3.5 millimeter. And it's going to pass it up to the USB-C end of it, where there is now an audio to digital conversion that's going to, or sorry, an analog to digital conversion that's happening. So this cable is basically taking the analog signal, reconverting it to digital, and then it's going to pass that digital file to your AirPods, where your AirPods Max will then reconvert it to analog and then finally give you the squiggly lines that hit your ears. And this back and forth, where it goes from digital to analog, analog to digital to analog again, is technically not lossless. And in fact, Apple would tell you just the same, but for some reason, they announced both of these things at the same time, and I think it just added to the confusion. And that brings us to Marquez's hot take on the Waveform podcast.
Oh, what?
None of you people can tell the difference between lossless audio and regular
That's
compressed
not
audio.
yeah,
Zero of you.
So he presented that as kind of a spicy take, but as a self-professed audiophile with a lot of experience in the hobby, I actually 100% agree with him. In my opinion, lossless audio as a feature of the AirPods Max, as a feature of Apple Music, is frankly kind of a meme. A lot of people get excited about it, they want it, they'll even spend money for it, but in my opinion, it's not going to improve the sound quality that you actually hear. And that's going to be a bit of a spicy take even with audiophiles. In fact, especially with audiophiles. A lot of people will disagree with me, but if you're not sure for yourself, I recommend checking this out. This is a test that NPR has on their website. I'll have it linked in the description down below. But this is a test that they've set up where you can compare compressed music clips versus uncompressed music clips. And it's a blind test, so you don't know which version of the music you're listening to. And it's a good way to test if you can actually hear the difference, or if you can only hear the difference when you know what the difference is. You follow me? While you're taking this test, and I really do recommend everybody take this test, ask yourself two questions, all right? Question number one is the question of the test. Can you hear the difference? For me, well, it's going to have 128 kilobit per second MP3s, 320 kilobit per second MP3s, and uncompressed WAV files. For me, I can usually pick out the 128 MP3. That does sound different, but between 320 and uncompressed, or yeah, a raw file, I can't really hear a difference. The second question you want to ask yourself is, let's say you can actually reliably pick out that difference. Ask yourself, does that difference matter? Is it worth getting excited about? Or, I don't know, are you only hearing it because you're listening super, super hard? And if you're in a more casual listening environment, you're probably not listening that hard. And for me, the answer to the second question is like an emphatic no. I don't care. In the stack rank of all the things that contribute to good sounding audio, lossless audio is pretty low in the priorities. Now, related to all this discourse about Apple AirPods and lossless audio, I saw Darko recently make this post talking about this new Campfire IEM and positioning it as a lossless alternative to the AirPods. And I kind of had to slap my forehead because I feel like someone like Darko should know better. Not because he needs to necessarily agree with me that lossless audio doesn't make a difference, but I feel like it has to be obvious, even to the audiophiles who care a lot about lossless audio, that the difference it makes is less meaningful than pretty much all of the other differences. So comparing this IEM with the AirPods and highlighting the fact that it's lossless, it's like it's pointing out the least meaningful difference between them. To me, it's like if you're comparing a Mazda Miata with a Ford F-150, and you highlight the difference being that the Mazda Miata is made with Japanese steel. It's like that framing only works if you're confused and you think that Japanese steel versus American steel is a more meaningful difference than all of the other differences that separate a sports car from a pickup truck. And that probably sounds obvious to you. But as someone who's spent a lot of time in the audio hobby, I can say that thinking that lossless audio is a more meaningful difference than like the frequency response difference between two different headphones, or even unit variation between two headphones made in the same factory, is wrong in exactly the same way. So hopefully that clears some things up and you have a better understanding of lossless audio. And frankly, why you probably shouldn't get that excited about it. Again, a shout out to our sponsor, HiFiGo. Check them out for your next audio purchase. Links in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and I'll catch you on the next super review. Cheers.
Join with the force of reviews. We now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit.